Welcome to the latest installment of the Run to Daylight show. I'm your host, Todd Burrows. And I got to admit, I'm a little disappointed my guest is not in plaid today. But I am glad that Neil Orefield is joining me. He has been on the show once before. Neil is a $1 million winner over at DraftKings and DFS. He has done very, very well in the DFS streets. And for the last year or two, he has been a Bestball bro as well. So we're going to discuss with Neil some of the things he's learned, how his journey has changed. Because when I had Neil on first time, he had pretty much just transitioned to trying to be a Bestball bro. And I think at this point, he is a full go Bestball bro who also is a DFS bro. So we're looking forward to discussing things with Neil and hopefully giving you guys some information that'll be valuable for you, whether you're playing on Underdog or at my favorite site, the FFPC. The FFPC, you can go to myffpc.com. And if you've never played there before, if you want to save $25, you can use the code DAYLIGHT, and that will get you a $25 credit. That is a straight credit, $25 just for signing up. They have $2 million tournaments, and the FFPC, unlike most sites, it's my favorite site to play because it gives you the most options. It's tight end premium, so the tight end position is more valuable, especially the tight ends that actually catch a lot of passes, which is kind of one of those subtle edges that not everyone talks about because all the tight ends tend to get pushed up in those streets when it's really the guys who catch a lot of passes who are the most valuable. Also, they have $2 million season-long leagues. And I didn't even finish the whole scoring thing. The other thing that I really like is 2 wide receivers and 2 flexes. So as the draft goes along, it gives you a lot more options to play. And you can, again, go to myffpc.com. And that's about it. Neil, welcome. I appreciate you agreeing to do this with me.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. Happy to be here.
And we've got some ageist comments already in the chat. Bestball on Call, a really cool guy that you should follow on Twitter. He is saying 40 plus bros unite. I think that's, 40. I haven't seen 40 in quite some time. So I am glad as all get out to be included in the 40 club. Back in the day when Jose Canseco hit 40 home runs and stole 40 bases, it was a pretty big thing in baseball. So, Neil, welcome again. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, no, this is always fun to talk a little bit of Bestball. I was just reading over the questions that you sent over, and that I completely missed that you had sent, and some high level questions. I'm still kind of ruminating on some of them. Have not I think I've got pretty good answers for some of them, and others I'm still kind of working through them. So hopefully on the fly we'll be able to come up with some answers that make sense here.
The best thing about doing a podcast with me is I'm always ready to answer my own questions. So If you get stuck, I will jump in and postulate, and that will hopefully leave the door open for you to discuss what I do. And it's always good to check yourself against other good Bestball bros. And, I appreciate you mentioning that the questions are high level. I have always tried to do that when I podcast. There's so many guys out there. And really, you watch the same podcast and you get asked the same questions. I'm trying to get better, and my podcast is not, if we get beginners, great. We're glad to have you here. But really, I like interviewing people who really do this, and I'm looking for information that maybe other people don't. And the thing that really always interested me about you is I've seen a lot of DFS bros really struggle in the Bestball streets, really struggle to kind of, to me, it really separates the guys who figure out problems from the ones who are really good with projections, right? Sure. And solving that one game. and you know, the guys who can make the optimizers sing. That is a great skill, but the fact that best ball is there's way, you know, even the really good analysts that do this, like Mike Leone and Dink always say, it takes about 4 weeks for those projections to really lock in, because
Sure.
by then you're answering a lot of questions about usage that up until then will always be just a speculation. But for you, as someone who has transitioned from best ball, you know, you do a lot of pods, having a lot of best ball bros on there in the community. What's your biggest takeaway from last year that you're bringing forward to this year? You know, we all learn something every year. What is the biggest thing that you feel that you learned?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I'm trying to do more this year that I didn't do enough last year is lean into my own instincts more, which honestly went wrong a lot last year when I did the times that I did lean into my own instincts. But I also feel like I consume so much best ball content, and there are so many really smart people doing best ball content. So it's easy to be swayed by other people. But I think that like my success in DFS has largely come from being a little bit contrarian, having conviction in my own plays that other people might not see the same way as I do, but I feel stronger than others about players that I like, about different builds that I like, that kind of stuff. So I think this year I'm going to try to not let other people sway me as much as I did last year, because it's hard. It's kind of hard to not be swayed by other people, because there are so many really, really smart people who have a lot of experience in fantasy football and in best ball. So like, I don't want to completely not take advice from people who have more experience than I do. But at the same time, I think it's important to sometimes, accept that nobody knows everything, and maybe your instincts can be good. So I think like one of my bigger takeaways this year is, yeah, I want to lean on my own instincts a little bit more. I also, last year I was fully zero RB, which I still really like, zero RB, hero RB. But I think maybe diversifying the types of builds a little bit more this year than last year is kind of a goal.
Yeah, so I was pretty zero and hero last year. I just picked the wrong heroes. I picked
Yeah.
Brees and Bijan, and the answer was Barkley and Henry. I always say a couple things. One, I always say I don't mind losing if I lose using my own what I feel strongly about. Right? What the worst thing is to be swayed and then have something that you've been swayed onto fail, right? So and the other thing I always say is the hardest part of this is to take in information and consider it without being pushed by it. That to me is that's my biggest challenge, is to be open to take in all, because human nature is you want to settle on opinions and then just get stuck in them. Or if you're the other type of person, to be pushed by whatever you hear, right? Like when I first started doing DFS, I was a mess because I'd listen to 6 different shows and each one would be touting their players for the week. And I'd feel like I had to get all of them into my lineups. And that was a recipe for failure. What little DFS success I had, which it's been a couple years, was when I really picked my guys for the week, added a little bit of some of the other things, but really took, where I was getting 70-80% of 4 or 5 guys, and then building around that core of what I felt the best plays were.
Yeah.
So you talk about zero and hero, and it's funny you mentioned that, because my biggest takeaway is from the last couple weeks, and I took off the whole pre-draft period. I didn't draft one best ball team, first time in however many years. I mean, even MFL 10s back in the day had early best ball, and it took me a while to get caught up. But the biggest mistake I felt that I made was going 2-0 running back. Even with hero builds, I wouldn't draft another second guy. It was, I was too much depending on chaos to happen. And not, I went from a guy who was always very concerned about advance rate to someone who wasn't concerned at all. And so my biggest takeaway, Neil, the last couple of weeks is in that running back room, I want to at least have a story on each team where I can be competitive with my running back room the first 4 or 5 weeks while I'm waiting for the chaos to give me those 0 RB opportunities. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100% agree. Like that's exactly the way I want to approach it. And to be fair, like I don't think that I ever lost sight of the fact, and you probably, I'm sure, didn't lose sight of the fact that you need to score points early. But I think we were making a lot of bets on like, well, Zamir White, in that kind of like we can go 0 RB and then you get Zamir White as starting, and then mixing in a lot of Zach Moss, and there were just a lot of kind of mid-range running backs who were like the first running backs that a lot of us were taking that ended up being big failures. Now you could have run
the mid-range was awful mid last year.
Yeah, other than like Chase Brown crushed in a big way, and then you had some late running backs that hit.
But he was 11th, 12th round for most of it last year.
Yeah,
I'm talking about like I'm getting a lot of Caleb Johnson, a lot of Tony Pollard, and often they're my second. Kenneth Walker, right? Guys who really, unless something weird happens between now and the start of the season, like Zach Moss and Chase, like we knew that was a chaotic situation that could have gone either way.
Yep.
I'm talking about building where we know Kenneth Walker is the 1A. We know that Tony Pollard is most likely the 1A. I want at least 2 of those, and sometimes 3 of those guys in even my 0, especially in my 0. In my hero, I'm willing to push it a little bit more because I've got the stud.
Yeah.
But in my 0, I don't want to be 200 points down in week 6, where even if I get the chaos I was looking for, I'm too far gone.
Yeah, no, I think that is 100% right. I think that I approach it kind of the same way. Like we're trying to layer our teams in ways that make sense. So, if we're taking early running back, then you can maybe not take a second running back until a little bit later. Or, you just take one of those, like you said, the Tony Pollard, Caleb Johnson. That's kind of the perfect range for an RB2. Yeah, it's really interesting. And trying not to take too much away from last year also is kind of the tough part to do, because it's not like we were idiots last year. Like we all want to think, we all talk like, oh, we've wisened up so much from a year ago, but like we're not really. Like we have one more year of experience, we have one more slate of experience, so we don't need to like change our entire mentality on this. But it is a year of experience that we can now factor into. Okay, I really didn't enjoy that when like we didn't hit things perfectly. Maybe I need to set myself up less, like requiring everything, relying on the chaos quite as much. So maybe being just a little bit less reliant on the chaos, having a little bit more of projectable volume early on, or like I should say not even projectable volume, because we thought we were getting that with like Zamir White last year, but like solid projections early on. Yeah, I guess just relying on chaos a little bit less than we did last year.
Zamir White is just a miss. See, again, that's not a strategic thing that I want to adjust. If I think someone is the lead guy and he turns out not to be, and he was hurt in the beginning.
Yep.
Those are the ones where I just pick myself off the ground, get up and use my best judgment the next year. But overall, for me at least, I was way too willing to give up, to bleed points early with the saying, well, it only takes one team to win, right? Sure. I don't want another. I mean, I had never had less than a average advance rate. And then last year I was like 11%, right? And I think a lot of really good analysts had similar years.
Yeah. I think I was lower than that. I think I had 14 out of 150 or advance, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, it's but again, 0 running back didn't fail. It just didn't work last year. A combination of just the guys we faded just going absolutely nuclear in Henry and Barkley, along with some of the guys like Zamir White that we counted on. And then the wide receivers that we counted on up top didn't have the big years either.
Well, And then on top of that, the wide receivers that were having big years got hurt. So it was Rashee Rice, it was Chris Godwin, Rashid Shaheed, like all of the wide receivers who were like cost adjusted based on their ADP. They were smashed to their ADP. They all got hurt midway through the year. So like even if you got wide receiver seemingly right, you got it wrong because they got hurt halfway through the year. So it was just a really tough year. And then yeah, Ayuk, another one. There were just so many of those. Chris Olave, just so many receivers that, I mean, these are guys that maybe weren't quite on the trajectory to be like the guys you needed. But there were a lot of.
It hurt zero running back every
Yeah.
time one of those guys got hurt, even if they weren't crushing.
Yeah. But then on top of that, I just got all the running backs wrong. Like Marshawn Lloyd, Kendre Miller, all the guys that I was drafting a ton of early on. I cooled off on Kendre Miller, but I just felt like
and me both.
Yeah, it was a tough year.
And that again, that's when I pick myself up and try and do better next year. I don't think Marshawn Lloyd was bad process. A guy who got injured 17 different times. I don't think, but I did underestimate how much they were going to give the ball to Josh Jacobs and how well he would do in that role.
Yeah.
And then, Kendre Miller, I could say was bad process on my part. Because there was negative verbiage about him straight through that at least I chose to overlook.
I actually started fading him pretty significantly after, but I had been so heavy on him early that it was kind of like, all right.
Once camp started and it was like, oh, okay, everything we've heard is reality.
It was really negative last year.
It was really negative.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had people who've stolen money from me that I hate less than Dennis Allen hated.
For real.
Kendre Miller. Let's pivot a little bit. You have a lot of great people on the show. Is there one guy this year that you've had on that just really impressed you with a piece of information, or their overall? I'm changing the question a little to help you. Or just really impressed you in a way that kind of a little more than you thought it would?
I think I know all my guests pretty well before I have them on. So I have on a lot of sharp guests. I really love talking with the like data guys, the guys who like really analyze data really deeply in a really smart way. I just had Mike Leone on yesterday, but everybody knows like Leone is always fantastic. I'd say Neil Farley is one that I just always love talking with. He's always doing his own kind of data analysis that he doesn't always share publicly. So it's always fun talking with him.
Trying to pick his brain.
Yeah, exactly. He Sacrilegious, another guy. Like I love having those guys on because I know they're doing.
Account?
He doesn't have a Twitter account. No,
I'm like, did he block me? I tried looking him up, and
he's on Discord. You can find him on various Discords. But yeah, no Twitter account for Sacrilegious. So those are a couple of the guys. But like like I said, I've had on a ton of really high level guests. Have really enjoyed several of them. It's just it's kind of a different experience for me getting to talk to those like deep data guys, because I can just ask them like, what is your data finding on this and this, versus just talking like player takes and stuff. That's always fun too, but that's more common for me. So yeah, I think those ones kind of stand out to me as some of my favorites. Yeah,
and that's a really good point. And I've always enjoyed having those guys on because that's not my strength. If they like what you like, it's nice to hear someone have good rationale to back up your thinking. And if they don't, it's nice to have someone challenge your views with something more than just an opinion.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. So as a DFS bro, you've had a couple years to process the changeover and what applies and what doesn't. Let's start with what from DFS that really is something that's been your go-to in your process do you think transfers very well over to the Bestball streets?
Yeah, and I think this one you can almost combine with what the previous question was for the last one, which is just like something that people have said that like really sticks with you, and it's kind of the way that I've always kind of thought about the equation that we're dealing with. But I think it's really well said is, what do you win when you win? I think that just like sums up both games for these large field contests really well. Like what is the bet that you're making? It's not just what are the odds of this working out, it's what are the odds of this working out in a way that's going to win you all the money. So I think that is pretty similar between best ball and DFS, because we're playing really large field tournaments where it's tough to beat hundreds of thousands of people in these contests. So you really need to be thinking about, not just little bets, not trying to win in some small way where, hey, this guy beat his ADP. He's ADP of 180 and he worked out as the 160th best pick. You're not just trying to do that in these contests. You're trying to put together lineups that can, if things go the right way, win all of the money. And it's not, yes, player takes are part of it, but also it's just layering in lineups in very specific ways. And I use the phrase layering. I think that's a big part of both DFS and best ball. In DFS, it's kind of layering projection and sometimes contrarian plays that have big upside, that maybe you're going to get that 2% owned play that's going to smash the field, and then just the rest of your lineup just works out exactly how they're supposed to, and that's enough to advance you to the top of the leaderboard. And it's kind of the same thing in best ball. I think you want some projection, like your team, you do want a team that's going to project really well, but you also want to take some shots on players that can like really outperform their ADP. And I think that's kind of a thing that a lot of people get wrong in both cases, both DFS and best ball. A lot of people think that it's just, it's all about upside, so I'm just going to take all of these players with a huge range of outcomes. And that's really not what you're doing. You're trying to layer in those players in both cases with players that you do kind of know what you're getting from them, and you like what you're getting from them.
Yeah, so that ties into the thing that I said earlier about the running back room, right? Like, I'm still taking on those teams with Pollard and Caleb Johnson and Kenneth Walker, let's say. That team, I might throw in a Tajay Spears. That way I've got both cheap ends of a backfield where they're the only two. I call it stack cuffing. But I'm also at the end of draft taking a Will Shipley, taking a Jarquez Hunter, trying to hit a home run at the back end. And one of the things that I've decided is that strategy is much better up until today, right? From today going forward, as we fill in information, and it's harder to find guys in the 16th, 17th, 18th round that aren't just dart throws, where you need multiple things to go right. I'm going to be a lot more. I'm going to want to be done with my running back room a lot earlier in 2 weeks than I was 2 weeks ago, because I can say Brashard Smith, right? He's a great pick right now. In 2 weeks, he might be a terrible pick, right? So, and the ones that we get more info, like if Jarquez Hunter is the clear number 2, Blake Corum is just dust or injured, he's going to go in the 14th round, right? Sure. I'll still draft him, but I will draft him as, my last guy. So I don't know. I'm drifting too much from the question I wanted to ask you. But I just thought that I would share that little tidbit of what I'd been thinking about is, I'm much more likely to take late tight end where it's not exciting, but at least I know I'm going to get a useful guy at the end of drafts rather than just really hope and pray in the 18th round going forward. Yeah. But on your question, you answered that really well. But you did take it to one step. But what are two or three different ways that you try and supercharge your teams to get to the top of the leaderboard that, maybe people that aren't as high level aren't thinking about, or maybe they are? But just give me a couple examples if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about structuring your team in a way that you are going to have enough points early on so that you don't get too far behind, so that you're, hopefully early on you are in the top half of the leaderboard and you're within striking distance of advancing. And then I do draft a lot of rookies because I think a lot of the time the rookies are the misplaced values. I think that's still true, even as rookies are moving up moving up draft boards and more expensive now. I still think a lot of the bigger hits are going to be rookies. So it's kind of making sure at every position you have some player that is going to score you some points early on. You don't want to have, all of the rookie running back dart throws. Now, there are some rookies like Ashton Genty, for example, who might be doesn't really qualify as a rookie running back dart throw. Like, he should have volume immediately and score fantasy points right away. But I think a big thing is just layering in players that have, high floors from the start of the season with players that, maybe you don't expect to have a ton of fantasy points in the first half of the year, but you expect them to score more as the year goes on. So I think that is one thing that I always try to do. Depending on where you're playing, you can kind of shoot for some unique combinations. It's harder to find like low owned players in best ball, because if they're low owned, they're probably most of the time not going to be great bets. But what you can do is try to find combos of players that nobody else is going to have. And I don't do it like too much of that, but on DraftKings, they actually give you the information this year. So you can try to figure out like, all right, who are players that are going to project, what are combos that are going to project similar to other combos that maybe I can get at a fraction of the ownership. So that's something I try to do a little bit. But for the most part, it's just, trying to have teams where I have enough talent at each position at the start of the year, and then enough upside bets throughout the lineup, not necessarily at each position, but enough upside bets in the lineup that I think can really help me separate in the playoff weeks that maybe aren't going to be huge advance rate pieces because you're not really scoring a ton of fantasy points throughout the year.
I use Spike Week, and Spike Week not only gives me the overlay, which, again, I don't want to get into that whole argument over, that, because it's not even close to what the complainers complain about at this point. And I don't know that it ever will be because of how much we don't know yet, about situations. But I do, and that does give you the combination. So for anyone out there, I can go in, and if I've done about 250 drafts right now, I can go in and see my opponent's combinations for the 250 drafts, and I can see how much, like I wanted to look up the other day. Who do the Rams play week 17?
The Falcons.
Yes. So I wanted to see how much. No, is it?
Yeah, it's the Falcons.
Yeah, okay. So I wanted to see how much Drake London was being drafted with Puka Nacua versus, and it wasn't more than, it wasn't really taking into account the fact that you get that week 17 bump, right? Because if everyone was doing it, I'd be less likely to want to do it regularly. But if the normal range of the guys who go in that range is like 15 to 18%, that where they get combined together. If it was 30%, I'd be like, whoa, that's a little high. But the fact that it wasn't made me want to push up some Puka or, to get that correlation and get something that's not owned more, but should be owned a little more and isn't. So I think that is an interesting point, and I really like that. I do think there's a value to combinations. I also think at times people
give it too much emphasis.
Yeah, they give too much emphasis on the fact of combinations just to be unique.
Right.
When the nature of these pods is you're really only going up against 16, 18 teams. When I'm in these pods and I'm looking at it's very rare to find a lot of, it's normally not more than 2 or 3 or 4 guys on a team that are similar to another team. You can differentiate teams without that, but it is nice for the finals. If like an underdog, 600 people, it is nice to differentiate. But your thoughts on how pods change the dynamic versus DFS?
It's really different. Yeah, the pods are like we are not really in a 700,000 person contest. Like people draft as though you're competing with 700,000 teams.
That's exactly what I meant. Yep.
We're not competing with 700,000 teams. We are trying to win a large field tournament, but we don't have to draft for just like everything to go completely chaotic, because you're only beating, you have to be top 2 out of 12 in round 1, which is the first 14 weeks. And then, like you said, it's like we're dealing with 12 to 16, 18 person field. I mean, it depends on the contest you're in, but like usually the second round, third round, you're not really in giant fields. And then even
Right.
in the final round, you're dealing with what, like 470 something on Underdog. I forget what the exact number, maybe 500. And then on DraftKings, it's like a little over 1,000. So it's just not, you really don't have to get as weird as people think you do. People try to be like, oh, I'm just going to draft 3 running backs on this team, or this is going to be a 1 tight end team. And like, you really don't need to do that to beat fields this size, because you're not really competing against 700,000 at any given time. You're competing against a much smaller field. And even if you were competing against 700,000, that's still questionable. That might work out a little bit better, but I think you don't need to get as weird with your construction in a contest that is structured this way, where it's really just a series of smaller field tournaments.
Yeah, you don't want to give up too much. And again, this goes back to what I was talking about with running backs. You don't want to give up too much value trying to be unique, because it will bite you. So back to the other question, the other side of the coin. Just give me 1 or 2 things from DFS that you thought might translate that really hasn't.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think that is one of those things. Is like, I think I needed a transition, and I've been playing for maybe 4 or 5 years now. I think I actually had some lineups in BBM1. I've just kind of been a progression where I play more and more every year. But I think that like that kind of concept is one of them that I sort of had to, figure out over time of like, yeah, I'm drafting a little bit too weird early on. And like the types of construction early on, I was mostly drafting 4 running backs, because I was thinking, well, you only need to have 2 running backs score in your lineup each week, and then you can have 4 receivers. So just layer on a ton of receivers, and they'll fix up the flex. And now I don't do as much of that, like 4 running back builds. I still do it some, but I think the concept of trying to beat 700,000 other, or whatever, hundreds of thousands of other contestants in the tournament, I think I've sort of figured out over time that it's not actually the same as DFS in that way. It's still a large field tournament in some ways, but ultimately you don't need to get as contrarian as you do in DFS.
Yeah, and I hate to say it, but I think luck plays a lot more
Oh yeah,
in best ball than it does in DFS, right? Just, the very nature of keeping people healthy for 17 weeks versus 1, where going in how healthy that guy is. It's a big difference. I mean, I've made the finals in the FFPC every year, and I came in 4th one year. The last 2 years, I made when I came in 4th, Jalen Hurts was my stud quarterback, and I didn't have him for week 16 or week 17. All I had was Mac Jones, and Mac Jones put up like 14 points, and I came in 4th. The rest of my team was that good that week.
yeah.
Last year, I got to the finals, and I had Jalen Hurts, and he got the concussion, and I had no quarterbacks for the finals. So, that's just something you can't. You just build the best teams you can with the best stories that you can, and hope that you've put enough of those teams in position to help allow you to get lucky.
Yeah, I mean, it's super fun, but it's 17 weeks of chaos as opposed to 1 week of hoping for a little bit of chaos in DFS. Like, yeah, there's obviously a ton of luck involved. I still think like ultimately probably there are more people playing best ball in a way that they have like really, really low odds of winning anything than there are in DFS, I think. So I think it's still probably like from an EV standpoint a little bit better than DFS, but ultimately like, yeah, we're all relying on more luck, I think, in best ball than DFS.
It's not as much as it used to be, but a couple years ago when Zero really got popular, I would do podcasts where I would go through the 12 teams in a draft that I had. And if 4 teams did 0 running back, I could point out most of the time how at least 3 of them did it wrong, right?
Yeah.
Where they just had no floor at running back. And, it's funny because the phrase that people kill you for is actually a good phrase, is better in best ball. I mean, I never like when people mock that phrase, because, you can't tell me that Justin Fields isn't better in best ball, right? Than season long. But the phrase that kills me is, well, anything can work, right? And so many people, smart people on Twitter, will justify horrible builds in the name of being unique.
Right.
You
Yeah.
find that to be true?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. People definitely
And
do things that
that's
are,
the advantage I think you were talking about.
yeah, exactly. People do things that are suboptimal, and it's technically true. Like, yeah, we don't know what's going to work, so anything can work. But a lot of times people are just building lineups like, yeah, but that lineup is just, the odds of that working are really low, and like you can just build, you can build lineups that have much better odds, both of advancing and of winning the whole thing. So ultimately, I think like if you just build structurally sound lineups, like you're just going to be better off.
I agree. And I call it the Keith Richards effect, right? Keith Richards has done every drug and every bad behavior known to man, and he's still going strong at 80. But, so if you look at that and say, well, it works for Keith Richards,
Right?
but
Yeah.
you don't think about all the rock stars and actors who died living that
Yeah.
same lifestyle, right? Yes, it could work, but you have to realize that most likely you're not Keith Richards, you're John Candy.
Yeah. Exactly. No, I
Or
think
John
that's great.
Belushi.
Yeah. Yeah. I've never heard that one, but I like it.
So you kind of answered this one. Those DFS players who haven't transitioned well to best ball, what is it that you think is the biggest? I think you already answered it, but I'm
Yeah.
going to throw it out to you. What's the thing that you find from your fellow DFS players where when you talk to them about best ball, you're just like, they don't get this?
Yeah, I think it is the structural thing. Like they
Right.
just structure teams wrong because like, well, this is a unique structure. Nobody's doing this structure, so it can win. And it's like, yeah, but it's not going to because it's a bad structure. Like the reason
Right.
nobody does structure is because you're just really giving yourself worse odds. Actually, that's another thing that that Sacrilegious talked about that I really liked, is just having more combos is really important. Like just gives you more outs to win. So like if you build with just one quarterback, it limits your combos because every combo needs to rely on that one quarterback. You just add in a second quarterback, you're doubling your combos or whatever. Like you're greatly increasing the number of combos that can go right for your team. So just that's something that I really took to heart. Is like,
That's a
you're
bet
right.
that I don't like, and I love my guys in the Spike Week Discord, but a lot of them do one quarterback and one tight end builds,
Mm,
and I'm just like, yeah, it could work. But I just feel, that 18th round pick at tight end, instead of taking Theo Johnson, you're taking, another running back, who might hit. It just, I just, it's not for me. I'm not
yeah.
saying it's dumb. I will say it's not for me.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's probably negative EV. So you don't have to call it dumb, but you can say you're making a negative EV decision by not throwing on another tight end most of the time. Now, that is something that I've been using the Sims from Leg Up, their sidekick tool,
Yep.
and they do occasionally, very rarely, they occasionally will say that actually this player is a better pick for you in the 18th round than a second tight end. But it's still something that I don't fully have not been able to fully buy into that aspect, just for that reason of it limits the number of combos. It also, like, in that week, whatever the week, say you have Brock Bowers, then in week 8, the barrier to entry for a tight end to make your lineups is 0. You're getting 0 points from your tight end. So if you throw on a Theo Johnson, every single point that he scores is going to make your lineup. Whereas if you're taking a 7th running back, it's whatever the 6 running backs ahead of them score, like that is the barrier to entry. Or, the third of those, that's the barrier to entry to make your lineup as a running back. Whereas a tight end at 0. So it's just, to me, it's a better bet to throw on a second tight end there.
Yeah. Now, one way I have changed over the years, because 2 teams advance, where in the old days, MFL 10 was just pretty much you needed to win. I didn't want to bleed points with bye weeks. I've gotten to the point where I really don't even look at bye weeks. I'm willing to take a 0 at quarterback on the bye week with the thought, 2 thoughts. One, I'm going to have a pretty unique combo because most people aren't going to take those 2 guys because they have the same bye week, right? So that is going to be way lower owned in general, which I think is important for the pods, because a lot of times with the pods, the guy who gets you through 1 week also brings with him a ton of ownership to the following week. So it's nice to have a different second guy with that first, like if Josh Allen goes absolutely nuclear in week 16, there might be 30% Josh Allen teams in the finals. It's nice to have, let's say, a guy who has the same bye week might only be owned 3% in that final versus the other quarterbacks being 10 to 15. So that's something that I don't mind doing. And the other justification I have is that on those 2 weeks where that one, I get the better score of two guys 2 weeks to try and make up at least some of those points that I bleed in the week I'm getting a 0. So, if, especially since I draft, and well, we'll get to this, but I draft a lot of quarterback teams this year. I'm taking some of the top guys, but a lot of times it's 2 in that range of the 7th to the 15th best quarterback. I want 2 of those guys. So to have 2, where they go the same week. But what are your thoughts on buys? I'm going on and on about this.
Yeah, so I've always been a bye week bro in that I do pay attention pretty closely to the buys. I will say I have moved in your direction. So I historically have been like, I want to have, if I draft 5 running backs, I prefer that they all have different buys. Now I don't really do that as much anymore. I'm still trying to cover all of my buys, and especially at like quarterback. I probably won't do any builds this year where I don't have all my buys covered. I don't think. Maybe I'll have a couple of those lineups. So I'm a little bit different in that I am paying attention, trying to cover those buys. I see your point. That's an interesting point of you are making up some of the difference of that 0 with the, potentially higher score in another week, or at least having 2 quarterbacks to potentially give you that is an interesting point.
And the uniqueness. Now I'm going to add a third thing to that, which is I'm only going to take that guy if it's also giving me a really good stack. And,
sure.
In other words, he is the best player on my board. That's why I'm taking him. And I'm not going to pass on him. I'm not going to pass on Michael Penix if I have Drake London, because, Penix has the same bye week as my first quarterback, right? Like when you add all those things together and the uniqueness, it's enough plausible deniability that where I feel I can turn off that bye week part of my brain and just focus on building the best teams.
Yeah, I mean, if it fits your team everywhere else. But I guess to me, it's like I'm never going to turn that off completely, because I think there is value in trying to do it. Mm-hmm. As far as uniqueness, I think I'd like to study that a little bit more, and I think we can do that now with the DraftKings data, because they've actually released the data. We can look at like
Let me know. I'd be interested.
Yeah, and I looked at it preliminarily, and it wasn't a huge difference in uniqueness, but I only looked at a couple combos of like CJ Stroud and JJ McCarthy, like their ownership versus CJ Stroud and Justin Herbert or something. I feel like
Trevor Lawrence goes near there.
Yeah, so I don't think it was like 3% together versus 4% together, so like a little bit of a difference, but not a huge one. But that's something that I have not like looked significantly at it. But yeah, if it is super unique, then it might be actually something to consider. So I guess I come at it from a different angle than you do, but I have moved closer to you since last year. We'll see. Maybe at some point I will become the opposite.
I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that's what I've been doing. So I'm open to it. I'd like to hear more. So we talked about the big edge in Bestball. To me, one of the things that's always going to make give you an advantage from year to year. It's not going to be a solved game, because the field every year overreacts to information based on a short sample size of what, only a few, it's a very small sample size. And then you've also got the fact that, what happened last year is fresh in everyone's mind. Do you think people are overreacting less this year than other years? And what's your favorite overreaction to take advantage of so far this year?
No, I don't think that people are overreacting less this year than others. Maybe a little bit. Like I'm sure we all get a little bit better every year because now everybody's one more year advanced. I mean, a lot of people don't have. I think you've been playing for many years. A lot of people are just 2-3 years into this. Maybe this is their second year, so we are maybe overreacting a little bit. Now I'll say for my sake, when Justin Jefferson was a rookie, there was the rumor came out that BC Johnson was playing ahead of him, and that year I was really heavy on BC Johnson and not drafting Justin Jefferson. So I've learned from that. That's one of those things that I think a lot of us who have some experience have gone through it and realized that a lot of the things that we hear from beat writers in June, July are not that meaningful. Of course, there was the Jamar Chase can't catch the ball. All those kind of rumors from beat reporters. I think generally those are my favorite things that people overreact to is the beat reporter says, and the beat reporter just doesn't really know. It's just kind of an offhand thing. They don't really understand how much they're going to impact the market. But yeah, I think in general, people are still overreacting quite a bit. And I think that is the thing that people overreact to the most is just like beat writer speak versus coach speak. I think you can actually, sometimes you can learn something from it. A lot of the time you also have to keep in mind the coaches want to keep their players happy. So it's like a lot of what coaches say, you should take it with a grain of salt. But I think you can usually parse a little bit more from coach speak than from what beat reporters are saying. And we just had Justin Fields today, like got carted off and everybody majorly reacts. And then cooler heads prevailed. A lot of
my most owned quarterback.
Yeah. And I think he's totally fine. Like I think at this point, it's like, he dislocated a toe that is not his big toe. But because he was carted off,
you could probably cut that toe off and he could be back in 3 weeks.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So not actually a big deal. But he's still like his ADP, I think, is still falling because
it's gonna fall.
Yeah.
So we got two. Well, I've got one, but I also want to get best ball on Call's question. Do you think the market has made an overreaction to running back given the 24 results?
I do. I do think so. Because I think that last year was a pretty big outlier in that all, or not all, but like the vast majority of the real hero running backs stayed healthier. Like the veteran running backs, guys who were aging, the guys that, we were not, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, like these were the guys you needed for the most part. They all stayed healthy, which had sort of a doubling effect where, first of all, they scored all the fantasy points and just put me into the ground or anybody who was drafting 0 RB. But then on top of them just outscoring all the early wide receivers significantly, then their backups also did nothing. So anybody who was relying on RB2s were, first of all,
even if you got the chaos, it didn't work out the way that it has. And what you're saying is that's a very short sample, and it right.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's people. That's always been the case. It's like every week of DFS, people are like, this is what happened last week, so this is what's going to happen next week. Isaiah Likely, was it last year, 2 years ago, smashed in the first game of the season. But because it was because our entire sample size at that point was just literally that one game, it was the first game of the year. People were like, Isaiah Likely is the best pick in best ball. How much Isaiah Likely do you have? Like that was the entire conversation was, oh no, I didn't draft enough Isaiah Likely, or people victory lapping their Isaiah Likely exposure. And in the end, I think he was fine, but like was not that big of a difference. People just love to react to every little thing that happens. So we have a full season,
especially on Twitter, especially the guys who are trying to build the wrong way a Twitter following. My thing is, I'm going to answer that on the running back, and then I'll throw you at mine. My biggest takeaway is I think this is why I asked if it's less than it. I think in years past, we might have had 6 or 7 running backs going in the first 3 rounds based on how good, so I do think there is a reaction, but it's not as much as I thought it would be. But where I've seen it's a more subtle change. But in the quarterback position, you've seen last year what happened. The stud quarterbacks weren't the answer, right? So they're cheaper. Now, the value proposition that Hayden Winks pointed out about in half PPR of getting that stud quarterback has not changed, but it didn't work out as well last year. But we had a lot of quarterback injuries. So historically, going back 10 years, the difference in advance rate between 2 quarterbacks and 3 quarterbacks year after year after year is a 1% difference. Sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 3 that's better. Yes, 3 does give you certain advantages, but if you nail the 2, and you also get, like I've done studying on advance rates where if you go 2.682 instead of 3.582, your advance rate's going to be in general better year to year with 3.582. But the year you get the right late sixth running back, you're going to crush what a 3 quarterback build will do. So add those couple together, and that it's harder to get the late quarterbacks because more guys are doing 3. I've always been kind of a 70-30 2-3 guy. I think I'm closer to 90-10 this year, Neil, 2 quarterbacks to 3. And most of the time I take 3 is just because I missed my second guy and I'm chasing a little bit. But I do like to be done by Michael Penix, right? I do like to be done by I don't want just any, this is the kind of thing we talked about with the builds, right? It's very easy to say 0 running back and make a horrible team that has nothing to do with what 0 running back should be. If you're going to build a 2 quarterback team, to me, is you want 2 quarterbacks who are at least I want each one to have top 5 potential.
Yeah,
your thoughts on quarterback?
I love your conviction there that you're going 2 quarterback. I would not say that I'm with you there. I am like, that's almost all my builds are going to be either 2 or 3 quarterbacks. I think I'm more even. I probably on underdog, I would guess I'm 50-50. Like it's pretty
this
close.
This is strictly 50-50. An underdog thing. DraftKings much more likely to go 3, certainly FFPC.
Yeah. No, yeah. In that case, then I'm mixing both. I think I'm probably a little bit heavier on 3 quarterback than 2 quarterback, even on underdog, I would guess, partially because I think I like a lot of the quarterback bets. So I'm really high on JJ McCarthy. I think Drake May is a great bet, but then a lot of the quarterbacks in that range, I really like CJ Stroud, Justin Herbert. Like I just think there are so many pretty strong later quarterback bets that I think I do more of those bets.
I do too. 2. I'm just only picking 2 of them per team. Okay. On underdog. I agree completely. Drake May is my second highest owned quarterback. I think Michael Penix is great. Stroud and Justin Herbert's the other one. Yeah. Like I've gone from 3% Herbert early to about 11. I think the fact that people think that's going to be a running team when they really weren't a running team last year. I really think that, Jim Harbaugh has never had a quarterback like Justin Herbert, and he's willing to let him do things.
Yeah, that's always an interesting thing with the coaching tendencies. You never know. Like, is that just because of the personnel they've had in the past? Maybe they'll adjust. You see it every year. Like teams kind of do different things than we're expecting. I think that makes a lot of sense. Like, because if you do really like the bets, just like bet on 2 of them, and if you're just make the bet that those are the 2 guys you need, I think that is definitely a reasonable way to approach it. For me, it kind of depends on what like the opportunity cost of a 3rd quarterback. So like when a 3rd quarterback becomes available, what else do I need? Do I prefer that running back, that receiver? And I think a lot of the time in that range, I just don't have a ton of other players that I really love. So it's often like, all right, I'll throw on Michael Penix. I've got Drake London on this team. Might as well put Michael Penix on this team because the other bet is, Ray Davis is fine. Trey Benson's fine. Whatever else is around there. Unless there is a player like right now, like Dylan Sampson's been moving up. And now it's like, okay, I'm going to take Dylan Sampson instead of a 3rd quarterback here. So it really kind of depends on what's available on the draft, what I want at that point in the drafting season, like what's appealing to me right now in there. And if there are players that to me look like really great bets at any given time, I will take them over a 3rd quarterback. It's pretty likely that as we get deeper into the summer, I'll do more 2 quarterback builds, just as I feel more strongly about like, oh, I really think Jarquez Hunter is the RB2, or I really think that this rookie running back is a great bet, or this rookie wide receiver is being slept on. The more I start to kind of fall in love with other plays, I might do fewer 3 quarterback builds. But to this point, I think I've probably done more 3 quarterback than 2 quarterback.
What's interesting there is, and I don't think there's a right and wrong answer with this one, right? I mean, it's just how I've been comfortable building teams, because I can get Jarquez Hunter in the 18th round. Right. I can get Brichard in the 18th round. I can get Jalen Royals in the, there's way more guys that I think have the kind of upside that can win me a tournament. And it goes, as you were talking, I was just thinking the opposite, that I'm more likely to do 3 quarterback builds as the 18th and 17th round get thinner and thinner.
I think you're giving the market more credit than I am. I think I'm remembering, a couple of years ago, I drafted a ton of Rico Dowdle when he ended up being drafted in taken in 4% of drafts, even though the Cowboys kept on saying this is our running back too. Not last year. Last year everybody drafted him, but a couple of years ago it was like they named him as their RB2 and people were still not drafting him. So maybe the market's gotten sharper to that kind of stuff.
That would be another interesting pod in 2 to 3 weeks to sit there and say, okay, what do you call it when one man's
trash is another man's treasure?
Yeah, that would make a really good podcast in about 2 to 3 weeks, because I think that's a very fair point, the one that you just made.
Yeah, it all depends on like market dynamics, like what does the market do, and maybe the market's gotten sharp enough that you might be right that we don't have those kind of bets in the 18th round anymore. I guess remains to be seen.
But I guess my larger point was, if I don't see guys I like, I'm much more likely, like I said originally, I'm more likely to take that third tight end who, he's not sexy, but he's a starting tight end, and I got him in the 18th round rather than really just throw a dart.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. We're getting close to the end here. Are there any other edges this year that you are really pounding that we haven't talked about?
That's a great question. What edges are there this year that I think currently it is like, I do like those late round rookie running backs quite a bit.
Yeah, me too.
A lot of people are taking them, so it's not the biggest edge. What else? That's a really good question.
While you think about that, I'm going to throw one out. Taking a guy like Will Shipley with Jalen Hurts, with the bet being if Barkley gets hurt, Hurts is going to throw the ball more. Shipley is also going to be super valuable. And they can, because of the nature of pods, you could have week 16, Shipley gives you 35 points. He's 60% owned in the final, but there's like no Jalen Hurts in the final. So that's one that I think, taking the backup running back, whether they catch passes or not, with the quarterback, because as a way to try and trick the pods.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense as a potential edge. I always like building those like team level bets. So like, we all will like to stack our quarterback with pass catchers. I think it has become more and more apparent as more research has been done that like quarterback with running back in general is just a good bet. So even if they're not correlated from it's a pass catching running back standpoint. So even like Michael Penix and Tyler Algier are probably going to be positively correlated for the season. So that is kind of an edge that I'm pushing
even
a little bit.
Even if it's not for 1 week, right? Like it's not something you do in DFS.
Yep.
But as much. I mean,
yeah. Exactly. So even like Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley, I don't do them together in DFS that much, but I'm perfectly happy to take them in best ball. And they're not the best example because you have to, take them both early, but there are a lot of times where it's like, oh, I have this quarterback already. I'll throw on one of his running backs. There's positive correlation there. There's just a lot of positive correlation in general within teams. And the one that people sometimes miss is quarterback with a running back, or even like running back and receiver, just betting on like this team is going to score more points
without
than people are expecting.
Someone ruined my stack.
Right.
There's a lot of value in having unstacked teammates.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And that's always a pretty good idea.
All right,
Yeah,
I don't want to melt your brain trying to get you to think of other ones. But let's move on. I think the ones you gave were really good, and I appreciate them. Um, what are your favorite training camp battles to look at? Which are the ones where you're like, boy, I really want to, like if how much I would pay to know the end result of this one.
I mean, Jaguars running back is the one that stands out to me. I'm sure that stands out to a lot of people. I think that that's an offense that we believe in. That I think it's going to be fascinating to see who wins out. Bashal Tutin, a guy, one of my highest exposed players. But if you tell me that it's just the Travis Etienne show and he ends up being like the guy you need this year, I wouldn't be shocked to hear it. If you tell me Tank Bigsby is going to run for 1,000 yards, I wouldn't be totally shocked. So it's a pretty wide open battle. Currently, I'm betting on the rookie, but I think that's a really interesting one. The Buccaneers, like Jalen McMillan, like what's his role going to be with Emeka Egbuka there and Chris Godwin's health? I think a lot of the running back battles in general are pretty important, where it's kind of an RB by committee. Yeah, the Jaguars one that stands
out.
Who's
the 1A? Who's the 1B? Who's the guy who gets 2 series versus the guy who gets 1 series?
Yep. Colts quarterback is actually pretty important to me also, because I think whichever of them, like if one of them were to win out the job outright and actually play most of the season, like I think both Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson, either one of them could significantly pay off their ADP. And currently I'm not drafting a ton of either of them. Dallas running back, that's a great one.
And we talked about this in the Spike Week Discord. At least consider the fact on some of these situations, the answer might be none of them.
Yep.
That, like last year, Dowdle was okay. Zeke was terrible, but neither one was a guy you needed to have because it wasn't that good of an offense. The offensive line wasn't as good as it had been previously. Sometimes the answer is none of the above.
I think Broncos last year was probably none of the above.
Oh, that's a great one.
Yeah, and that was one. A lot of us were drafting a ton of Broncos, myself included.
Raiders running back. The answer ended up being for a couple
Sincere
weeks.
McCormick,
Amir Abdul.
Oh yeah. And then it was like Sincere McCormick, who nobody drafted at all. Yeah. So it was that's a good one too. Yeah, I mean that's for sure. Like we think that there's always going to be somebody's going to emerge and be the answer, and sometimes it's somebody that's not even on the roster, like Kareem Hunt last year.
Yeah,
I forget when he signed exactly.
It was during the season, I think.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah.
When Pacheco went down, and that's the thing with these backups, it's why I like the coach speak index so much, because you can really get a sense of what the teams think about their backup just because they're the second, and I hate ambiguous backup situations, right? Because the answer might end up being, if they can't decide between 2 bad guys, the answer might not be on the roster. If one guy's good enough, then, all right, sure. Last question. And then we'll, oops, I hit that by accident. No pod would be complete without a short list. You've already given us a couple of your most owned players by position, and also who are the guys that you just really have a hard time taking at ADP?
Okay, I'm pulling up my my exposures. I know Bashal Tutin's going to be on that list. I think Jalen Knoll is going to be on that list as well.
I have a lot of Knoll, and I started with a lot of Tutin. I backed off Tutin a little bit. I know I shouldn't have on the fumble, but there's a lot of other guys in that range I like.
Yeah, that's I'm refreshing now. JJ McCarthy is a guy that I draft a ton of. I'm also a Vikings fan, so I need to be upfront that there might be a little bit of homerism in my. I don't always let homerism come in there, but I think I actually believe in JJ McCarthy, and I mostly believe in the Vikings offense. So
Kevin O'Connell got Sam Darnold not to be horrible.
Exactly. Yeah. So I have 29% JJ McCarthy, and then my second highest exposed quarterback, I have 15% each of Trevor Lawrence and Patrick Mahomes. So you can see the big drop off there from JJ McCarthy to the next. At running back, it's actually DJ Giddens is my highest exposed running back.
That's the one guy that late I haven't been taking a lot
Oh,
of.
really?
But he's one of those guys who just keeps staring me in the face.
Yeah, he's just a contingency bet. Like, he's obviously not going to be the RB1 there, so he really needs an injury to Jonathan Taylor to do anything, and it could be Khalil Herbert. So I don't feel like actually that strongly about it. I'm kind of surprised to see that I have 25%. But I think he's one of those guys that is
the
a fine
guy
bet.
that Shipley's my number one. I mean, other than Pollard, I have a ton of Pollard because he's just too cheap for how good he was last year, and they've improved the offensive line. I really like Pollard and I like Spears, and you can take them together. But I'm shocked at how late Isaac Orendo goes. I've just been, Shipley to me is a no-brainer with that offensive line, and there's really no one else there. And people seem to be afraid of Orendo when they let their other two running back, Mason and Mitchell, go. And they just drafted kind of a gadget guy in Jordan James. He's a nice little player. Garendo, I wasn't a big Garendo guy coming out, but 5.0 yards last year. I don't know.
Seems like a pretty good bet. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. He is a very, very strong bet. Honestly, I'm looking at my exposures. I'm kind of surprised by a lot of them are not actually the players that I am the highest convicted in. I like Garendo. I like Jordan Mason quite a bit. Although
I got
he's
a lot
raised,
of Jordan Mason.
He's moved up enough that at this point
I backed off a little bit.
Yeah, I still draft a fair amount, but not as much of a mega bowl as I once was. Yeah, and then Jalen Noel at wide receiver is actually my highest exposed. I have a fair amount of Trey Harris. I don't have as much Jaden Higgins on underdog, mostly I think because I did last week. I was DraftKings partner, so I've become a pretty mega bull on Jaden Higgins, but has not caught up. He's also more expensive on underdog. Xavier Worthy is one of my highest exposed on underdog, which he's moving up, so I guess I feel okay about that. Ted McMillan I've drafted a ton. Justin Jefferson, Juwan Jennings. Yeah,
I've got a lot of Jennings. I think that people don't believe what they should. I've got a ton of Chris Olave. What if he, really good receiver going 4 rounds later than last year.
Yeah.
And I take a lot of Shaheed, and I'll even put them on the same team sometimes. One of those guys is very, very likely to crush ADP.
Yeah, I only have 6% Chris Olave. He's one of those guys that I am trying to mix in more. I think he's really polarizing because, like you said, great. Like, we really believe in the talent. It's just I think a lot of us are like, yeah, but he's got Tyler Shuck throwing in the ball. I don't want to do that stack. I don't want to add Tyler Shuck on. So maybe I need to get a little bit more.
I just don't draft them with. I just decided I was going to draft those two guys, not worry about the stack. Not every wide receiver is going to be stacked.
Yeah.
And I just think that both of them have the at the end, if one gets hurt, the other one's probably a second or third round pick next year. Even with, we've seen bad quarterbacks get, receivers enough.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
No, the concussion thing is scary with Olave.
Yeah, that's the other thing. So it's the concussion thing and the quarterback thing, and then it's just like in that range. Like if Jennings is there, I'll usually click Jennings over him. But I do think I probably need to get a little bit more Olave because I don't generally love that many picks in that range. So
I've got a ton of Brian Thomas for a first. I
normally love BTJ.
I normally don't have 19%, and I've got just about as much of Neighbors. I just think, you turn over the cards next year. Would you be shocked if either of them was pick 1-1 next year?
No, not at all. Yeah, definitely live. Yeah, and actually two of my top 3. Well, I'll just read off my top 3 tight ends. It's Dallas Goedert number 1, and then it's Brock Bowers and Trey McBride. I've actually
interesting
as I've gotten to more confidence in some later tight ends, I've backed off a little bit. I think early on I was just slamming Bowers and McBride, and more recently I'm kind of like, there are actually some late tight ends that I like as bets, so I'm actually doing less of the elite tight end thing. I'll still take them at I'll take Bowers at pick 17 or 18, but for a while I was sometimes taking him at 14. I would move him way up. Now it's more like I'll take him at ADP if nobody falls. I don't like the other values.
It's so funny because I've done the exact opposite. I started out really liking, like Goddard's my number one on tight end too. So you get that reinforcement on that
Yeah.
one. Goddard's my number one, but I like a lot of the tight ends in that range. And so I've lately been pushing myself to take more Bowers and McBride because it's just been so easy for me to click two of, Goddard, Hunter Henry, because I like Drake May. He's an easy back
Yeah.
stack. Jake Ferguson, Dalton Kincaid, Brenton Strange, Evan Ingram, all those guys, and David Njoku. I mean, those are all near the top of mine. So I've been pushing more McBride and Bowers lately. And I think it makes sense because I do think there's a value gap in that late second, early third round.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah. It's all about what you're passing up, right?
yeah,
It's like,
you're not taking there's nobody in that range that I regret if I don't take.
yeah, exactly. So it's like once you get past the players that I will regret if I don't take them, then it's like I guess I'll take the tight end because
Right.
like that he could just really separate from the position if things go right. But yeah, it's kind of a struggle. But yeah, so those are two of my top three right now. They might end up there. There are some later tight end bets that I really like. You just named a lot of the players that I am pretty into. Now I've actually moved like Tyler Higbee significantly up my board. I think he's probably a little bit undervalued because people
I
are
think you're
too
right.
afraid
He's
of
not
the
even
Terrence
going in
Ferguson.
every draft in 18
Yeah, exactly.
rounders.
Yeah.
He's not exciting. I didn't do my top quarterbacks. Fields, 18%, 15% May. Again, these numbers are a little lower because I don't take three.
Yeah.
Trevor Lawrence, 12, Jaden Daniels, 12, Dak Prescott, who I really like, 11. I mentioned I'm up to 11 on Herbert and 11 on Mahomes. So we are on a lot of the same guys. We're just funny that we're getting to them in different ways.
Yeah. Well, Fields is one that I have not been super in on. And I keep on talking about, I've actually moved him significantly up my ranks because it's like, I struggle with if I don't have the receiver, then it's like, well, I'm not going to take quarterback here. And I'm like, Fields is I think Fields is a great bet this year. I don't have enough of him. So I've had to move him significantly up my rank. So when I start thinking about him at around like pick 75, then it's like, all right, once I get, if it comes to my pick and I don't love any of the other picks, rather than like forcing in, some reach for a receiver or some running back I don't really love, why don't I just take Fields because I think he's a really strong bet here. So yeah, I like that quite a bit. Although I have not there yet. I'm hoping to get there by the end of.
I have over 40% Fields on FFPC because it's 125 a team. You just don't get as many teams.
Yeah.
So my thought process, and feel free to knock a hole in it. I don't have an ego with this stuff. My thought was because they don't have receivers, they brought him in. I don't know that they think, neither team he was on, other than that short period of time with Chicago, really said, hey, we're going to let this guy run. And I think Aaron Glenn is going to let him run. And and when he runs, he puts up 40-point weeks, which, as you know, are really nice for Bestball.
Yeah. Right.
So that was my thinking.
Yeah, no, I think he's a great bet. Like he definitely has a ton of upside. Scott Barrett just put out a tweet earlier this week, I think, about how like in his seasons, like where when he's actually been the starting quarterback, he always puts up elite numbers. And for some reason, we're just not drafting him like that. This year, we're drafting him more like there are question marks about whether he's going to be the starter, like we were drafting him last year. I mean, it's somewhere in between, but like he should probably be going a few rounds higher at the very least than he is right now. So yeah, I think that's a great bet that you've been making that I have not been making, that I'm currently trying to correct.
And he goes right around Bo Nix, who I also like. I worry a little bit about the sophomore thing. Sometimes quarterbacks will regress, but I like, what I love about Bo Nix is I think people are way sleeping on Troy Franklin and Vele. One of those two guys is, everyone wants to drop Pat Bryant. Good guy, little raw. And you've seen that when someone's raw, like Mims, Peyton doesn't play him. And they've, I just like when, it's so easy to backstack Knicks, even if you don't have Cortland Sutton. Fields, I don't care if I have taken Josh Reynolds in the 18th round.
Yeah, me too.
I think people are looking down on Josh Reynolds, and I think he's perfectly fine there.
Yeah. I think perfectly fine is the perfect description for Josh Reynolds.
Yeah. But that goes back to your earlier point that not every pick in best ball, if you look at, like, I didn't draft any Mooney last year.
Right.
Because he just wasn't exciting.
Yeah.
But guess what? He was exciting. I just didn't see it.
Yeah.
Right. Josh Reynolds, would it shock you if Josh Reynolds caught 5 bombs this year from Justin Fields?
Right. Yeah, not at all.
He's got that kind of skill set.
Right.
All right. Last, and we've gone a little long. I apologize. You've been a good sport about it. Who are the couple guys you're fading that you just can't click?
Yeah, that is a great one. So far, I am fading Derrick Henry, which I think I don't love it on Underdog, which I guess this is an Underdog show. I don't necessarily think it's a great idea. I'm generally making
it's an FFPC and Underdog show primarily.
Yeah. So I'm generally making a bet against the veteran, like the older veteran running backs right now.
I've got 1% Derrick Henry. So again, we're aligned. It's scary as hell, but
yeah, it is scary as hell. But I think that the macro bet against Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, I do draft some James Conner, but like Joe Mixon, a lot of those older running backs, I think this year probably they're not all going to stay healthy all year, and they're going to be more of these, great rookie running back class. They're going to be more hits, I think, in the later round running back. So I think we're going to have a better year from a zero and or hero running back perspective. So I am doing more bets where I'm, going to be probably under the field, and I'm not trying to full fade any of them, but I'm probably going to be under the field on basically all of those veteran receivers that are going pretty early. Mixon probably being like the biggest fade for me currently,
because he's already hurt.
He's already hurt. So I think that's probably one of the biggest. There are some that it's like Marvin Mims is a fade for me just because I don't even see him.
I just too high.
Yeah, exactly.
And I love Trey Harris tape, but I'd been taking QJ, 4 or 5 rounds.
QJ is a pretty good bet that I need to, I've been making more QJ bets recently. It took me a little while to warm up to QJ.
Me too. I'd have even more if it didn't, and that's the thing that's a good Discord will do for you. It will challenge, you throw out these guys, I throw out these names and say, I'm not drafting any of so-and-so. And you'll get like really smart people who call you a fucking idiot.
Right. Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
And what, I kind of need that because every year I lose way more on who I faded than who I drafted.
Certainly last year with Saquon and Derrick Henry in that group. Like, that was rough.
Oh, I famously faded Cooper Kupp. Oh, he's coming off a knee injury.
Right. Yeah. That was rough. That was a bad year to fade him.
That was.
I assume you're not talking about last year. Yeah.
No. I'm talking about when it was bad.
Peak Cooper Kupp. Yeah.
And I drafted no Rams wide receiver that year. So that's another. You talk about things you've learned. I do the thing I call the seesaw. If I'm off of one guy and it's, early, well, unless the backup really is someone I don't like, I force myself, because you're doubling down on that bet.
Right.
Because if you're right that the guy you faded stinks, the guy who, this is a DFS thought. Who's likely to benefit if the field is wrong on the chalk?
If you're betting on Christian McCaffrey, if you're betting against Christian McCaffrey because you don't think he's going to be healthy all year, you should probably be taking some Isaac Guerrero and Jordan James. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
All right. That's going to do it for this episode. Again, Neil Orefield. Neil, tell everyone where they can find you because you are a man of who smatter your exposure around a little bit.
Yeah. So I'm at PlayerQDFS on Twitter. On YouTube, you can find me. You can just search my name. It's called The Flannelverse. I do content these days. I'm doing consistent content every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern, every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern. I do a show now with Mathology. Great show. Really, really sharp guy. So
I gotta start watching that.
Yeah, we just did the first episode this week, so you are not too far behind.
Good.
We just on this. It's called Mondays with Math. Every Monday with Mathology at 4 p.m. Eastern.
That's
We'll
my
do a show.
weakness, so I got to jump into some of those comments.
Yeah, those are it's a fun place. Yeah, so you can check me out there in the Flannelverse.
And you must watch during the season Neil with Scott Barrett.
Outside the box.
That is one of the Scott. I kind of joked with Scott on Twitter. He goes, "I miss the days when people would give me shit on Twitter." And I said, "Well, to be fair, since you've been a CEO, you've mellowed out quite a bit." But
True.
But while his sharp edges have calmed down, his sharp mind hasn't. And you get really good stuff out of him every week.
Yeah, so, no, it's always a fun show doing that with Scott. We dive pretty deep.
Yep, that's going to do it. Again, use the code DAYLIGHT at myffpc.com. Save $25 on your first league. And Neil and I will see you later.